All right, thanks for sticking around for the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Rich Walsh in for Bob Pompiani. Tonight we have an all-star lineup for you at the all-star break. Jeff Hatthorn from 93.7 The Fan, Will Graves from the AP, and Chris Adamski from the Trib. We're going to be talking about the Buccos, the Steelers, Pirates first-round draft pick. We're going to start about the Pirates. Jeff, at the break, 500. Just kind of give me your thoughts on where they are right now. Above expectations, below, or just right where you thought they would be?
Well, they've got hope, right? They've got hope at the All-Star break. That's the biggest thing for them. I think they're pretty much where most people thought they would be, somewhere around 500. Although when they kind of got into that doldrum before Skeens, and even with Skeens there, you're like, man, they're wasting too many opportunities. They're wasting too many good pitching opportunities. But they found a way to hit, and I have to give Filippone credit. He said on this stage right here a week ago that they would go 6-1 this week, and no one believed him, and they did.
They needed to go 6-1.
Right up there with this Kenny Pickett prediction that it would be an All-Pro, right? I think that, 500, I guess.
I mean,
I will say
come
this, on, Chris.
My preseason prediction of 81 and 81 is I'm feeling pretty good about that right now. But I think, in a weird way, because of the way the season's gone, because they have not hit, and they're still in the mix. They're still, it's weird. When the season started, we were like, well, we think they're going to hit some. Cruz is back. You got Reynolds, blah, blah, blah. I don't know about the pitching. The pitching has become the strength by a wide margin. Mm-hmm. So that gives you hope, because that is harder to find, I think, than offense, especially in this year where there's not a lot of offense to go around. But the decision that lies ahead for them is how good do they think they can be by October? And that's what Ben Sherrington's got to figure out over the next couple of weeks.
I think to answer the question, I think they are right about where we thought they'd be, right at 500 or around 500 to be exactly 500. But I in some ways, I feel like the record underperforms how they've played. There's been a lot of those blown leads late. Whatever you want to say about some of their offensive players, and we can kind of go through one by one, I think that they're probably a better offensive team than they've showed the first half. So if you take those encouraging signs and then Skeens, I guess, has been here longer than half the first half and been really, really good. But I feel more, maybe it's a 6-1 stretch here. Maybe if you asked me last Sunday, I would have said totally differently. But I think there is legitimate reason for optimism to think that this is a 500 team now that's played better than a 500 team. And if they are, even 4 games over the rest of the way, that's what the Diamondbacks were last year, right?
500 a team doesn't really get you into the postseason. I mean, they're in the conversation right now.
But not a lot of
they're in the conversation, but there's so many teams right now that are in the mix. Well, I mean, that's it. Just
right, and that's. I mean, we have to think about the trade deadline's in 2 weeks, and they come out of the break. They've got the Phillies at home, and they got the Cardinals. I mean, the Phillies are not going to catch. Phillies are making the playoffs, but that is how good are we? That is a measuring stick series for where they think they are. And then the Cardinals, the Cardinals are the Cardinals, right? So, they haven't had a great season, but they're still ahead of the Pirates in the standings.
And you got the Diamondbacks after that, which are another team you're jockeying with. And then you have Houston, which is more, not for a playoff spot, but obviously one of the better teams in baseball the past decade. Another measuring stick right into the trade deadline with those 4 series. So, yeah, if they are above 500 leading in the deadline after that, that means they had a pretty good stretch against some good teams, and maybe then you are a buyer. Although that market's so hard to buy now with these 3 wild cards. There's a lot more buyers and sellers, so the price is way up.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, because there's so many teams that are in it, and there are so few teams that are out of it. Obviously, the White Sox, I believe, are already eliminated, and they're just a horrid team. Luis Robert, though, would look good in black and gold. And that's a guy you would like to get. Plus, you'd have a couple of years control. That's what, the conversation about, the control with Taylor Ward, the outfielder for the Angels. Those type of guys make sense, even if you don't end up doing anything this year, because you're going to have them for more than 1 year, and this team needs hitting prospects. I mean, hitting help. They don't have hitting prospects.
All right, since you brought it up, I was going to wait till the second segment to talk about what the Pirates need to do. Will, he mentioned some names here. Are they going to be buyers or sellers? I know it depends on what they do there, but we're 2 weeks away from that trade deadline. They need bats. They need middle relievers. And what position do you address? Because they have a bunch of average players right now.
Well, they're 500 teams, so it stands to reason they have a bunch of average players, Rich. But, man, I don't know. I still think – remember at the end of last year, Sherrington went on a podcast and he said, well, we projected at the beginning of the season we were a 4th-place team, right? And they were a 4th-place team. I think it's a situation where how good they think they are and where they think they're at versus like whatever product we see on the field right now are two different things. And I still think that they believe that they are probably really a year away. I think Ben is not, we saw John Parato's piece this week that, Sherrington, according to the people that he's talked to, doesn't have as much money and as much freedom as he thought he would. Surprise, surprise. If that, and John's been covering this team a long time. I have no reason to think that reporting is inaccurate. If that's the case, I think Ben is kind of saving up his chips for one shot, and he's not going to blow it on this particular club.
I think, though, a lot of the names have been floated, and I think even baseball overall, there's an evolution in terms of the trade deadline. It's not always Reynolds anymore. And I think that everybody, we've talked about it, we mentioned it already, the Pirates are arm heavy both at the major league level and at the prospect level. I think it just makes sense that you have to start using those assets to start getting some hitting. So if there's a guy that has 2 years or another year of control, 2 years left in his deal, 1 year left in his deal, won't be a rental. It will be a player that can help push you this year and be part of the future and be part of the team whenever, maybe you do peak next year or the year after that.
You brought up two great names, Robert, Ward. What do you have to give up for those guys?
You're going to have to give up Bubba Chandler or Harrington.
And is it worth it because you have a couple years with these guys in the majors, though?
Well, I mean, who do you already have locked up in your rotation? I mean, you've got 3 guys that are going to be in your rotation, you would think, for the next
at least the next
4 years.
Right. Yeah.
And then you've got other guys that you can fill in to be 4 or 5s, and Priester and Ortiz. I mean, at some point, you use one of those chips, whether it's this trade deadline, whether it's the offseason, but they're valuable chips in this. You don't hold on to all your prospects. I just don't know, to Buzz's point, that you give everybody away for Pete Alonso to try to make a run this year.
But the thing is, let's remember the model that Ben has talked about since he got here was that we want to be like Oakland, we want to be like Tampa Bay, and what does Tampa Bay do? Their guys, get really good, they develop them, they get to the point where they're going to make a lot of money, and then they trade them for more prospects. I don't see, it's going to be I would be stunned if Ben gave away a high-profile guy like Bubba, like Harrington or Tamar Johnson to get somebody that can help right now. I would be stunned.
But you have 3 pitchers, and if you get to the postseason, you get to that wild card, you have a chance to win and maybe do some damage with the 3 guys you have. You just need a couple more bats, right?
If you're giving away somebody like that, though, you're getting somebody with control, like the names
that's going to help you this year and next year.
It's not a one-year rental for somebody like the names we mentioned. And the other thing is, everybody loves to play GM, myself included, and you got to know that other GMs aren't going to take your trash for their best player. Like, you get this thought process of, well, we'll trade Taylor and Grandal and, whoever else.
Throw in Bart.
And we're going to get Taylor Ward back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just think I'd feel more comfortable if they were 5 games over. That's how I'd feel. I mean,
I would too. I think everyone in Pittsburgh,
right? But I don't know. I do think there is a path where if they did get a rental, it wouldn't be one of those top prospects, like Jeff just said. And I think there is a path where there's a guy who, Ward is, what is he, 30? It's right in that sweet spot where he's not maybe not long term, but he's signed for another year. He would help this year's team. He would be a good piece on next year's team too. And that's the type of player that, just the type of player that if you deem him good enough, he's not just a rental, he's for next year too. You're building something here. It's obvious they need some other bat that doesn't seem like it's in the system. There's 2025, they have to go to the market somehow, whether it's free agent market, if they want to be a real contender next year, or some kind of trade, whether now or the winter or whatever.
Well, if they had a couple more bats, Will, you'd be right. They would be 5 games over 500. We got to take a break. Back with more Bucco talk coming up next. All right, welcome back to the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Rich Walsh in for Bob Pompiani. Tonight, we're going to continue with the battle in Buccos right now. Will, they got Paul Skeens. They got to do something here. You got to make a move. You got to do it for when you have these kind of pitchers, right? Paul Skeens is no doubt the best pitcher in the National League, I think, right now, and he's put the Pirates in a place to be competitive.
I mean, I think you need to do something, but I think it's not just about this season. I think every decision they're going to make is based on, is it going to help us next year? Is it going to help us the year beyond that? But I do think that they do have to do. They have to. I think even let's remember if we looked at and I understand it was a previous regime, but if we look at the Neil Huntington era, in 11 they started to buy a little bit. Remember they brought in Derek Bell around. They were almost in the same spot. They were around 500 at this point. I remember they got to 3 over at some point, and obviously it tailed off. I think they're still there. So I think a minor buy would. But I also saw something this week, and I'm not trying to steer the conversation away from Rich, but somebody also pointed out will Paul Skeens' trade value ever be higher than it is right now?
Oh, gosh.
This town would go absolutely crazy if they even suggest
Tony's
that. You
ears
cannot
just
do
perked up somewhere.
You cannot do
No
that.
way.
You cannot do that at all. I mean, I don't even think that's a topic of conversation. You cannot trade Paul Skeens right now. It'd be unbelievable. It would ruin this organization.
If they even trade Water, we talked about unless they really tank these next couple of weeks and go, what would that be, 3-9 or whatever it would be in the next 4 series before the deadline, I do think they'll, even if it's almost optics, I hate that word, adding like you said, like a Ryan Ludwig, that type of thing, just to add another battle. It was like, hey, we're buying, we are all in on this season, or at least we're not selling off the 1-year guys, Chapman, whoever it might be, and at least supplement the team and give them a shot to at least, if they're in the periphery of that wild card, to make a push there. Because you could talk yourself into saying this team could make a push and make the wild card, and everybody talks about it in a 3-game series that with the starting pitching they have, they could win that, right?
I mean,
Jeff,
hopefully they're starting to open a window that is going to be open for about 3 years.
That's what I was going to ask you. What's this window? Because you only have Paul Skeens maybe 3-4 more years, right?
I think you got about a 3-year window from like 25 to 27, much like they had with 13 to 15. You got something in that range this offseason, and now you've got Skeens that might be more of attraction to a free agent. You gotta spend your money, because that costs you nothing. I mean, other than the dollars, but it doesn't cost you anyone from your farm system. Like this offseason, there should be names that they're going after and going after hard. And if you have to overpay, because they've always said, once our time, we're going to spend that money. Well, we're going to find out if that's true or not here coming up.
Well, I mean, I did a story, this going back a while, in 15 at the end of the season, that 98-win season. Talked to Omar Minaya when he was with the Mets, and he said when you start that rebuild, you have a 6-year 6 to 8 of that rebuild. That is when you're trying to cash in. And if you look at where they're at, and if you look at the Neil Huntington's regime, that's exactly what happened. That was year 8. 15 was year 8. This would be year 5. Next year would be year 6 of the Ben Cherington era. So I really think it's not this year. So I would be wary of them doing anything other than, hey, we made, like to Buzz's point, made a move, like when they signed Aroldis Chapman for $10 million. And I think it was to basically say, so they could say, hey, look, we don't have the lowest payroll in baseball. I think it'd be that kind of thing.
All right, well, wait a minute. Play GM. I know you talked about play GM. Play GM. Can they sign Paul Skeens? Offer him a deal right now. 10 years, $300 million. Is that not enough?
There's so many different ways you could go with this. Do you sign him just to give him like a big raise? Because essentially he has 1 year where they can pay him whatever they want next year, minimum salary, and then he's going to go to arbitration. So then it's going to start going up those 4 years from there. So if you give him a big raise, give him a bonus, go in the next year. But it depends. There's so many different directions he could go. Maybe things I want to cash out as early as possible to free agency. Maybe if you buy out 1 or 2 years a free agency, and then you give them more money than you would these next couple of years. If you don't do anything, you could almost do. You talked about the window, and you talked about the salaries. It's almost like a very football thing without a cap, because the Pirates have their own salary cap, sort of, where everybody says the rookie quarterback. That's where your window is to win it, because you can pay everybody else. Right now, Paul Skeens is making nothing, and next year he's making nothing. You could pay somebody big, and then it's kind of the pieces fit together that way.
Listen, maybe you buy out some of his arbitration, maybe, but you can be patient. You don't have to do it now. You really don't.
You won't be able to afford him then.
You're not going to probably be able to afford him at any point. You know how much money he's going to command on the open market?
But I'm saying
why
why
would he sign a 10-year deal right now? Why
You're
would
getting $300 million.
Your best bet is to have
$350 million, something like that,
Your
right?
best bet is to have Kutch pull him aside and be like, my guy. Like, let's remember in 2012 when he signed that extension.
How about Polanco pull him aside? Look what happened. He got it.
I mean,
they need like Mark Pryor to pull him aside and say, look, my arm could go, like, sign it.
Yeah.
The deal that Kutch signed, that really, that sort of, like, that was a big investment for the team, but it turned out to be a massive bargain for these guys. I think that is their best deal. Like, can you meet us in the middle? He's going to be talking to everybody in the world this week about how much he loves Pittsburgh, and he does. He does love Pittsburgh. I have no reason to believe that he doesn't love Pittsburgh, but so could you get him on a discount? No, but you might be able to get something reasonable in the short term. But I would say
people love money too.
$50 million. He would $50 million is what he's going. Whenever he hits the open market, it's going to be $50 million.
He's 22 years old now too, so he conceivably could even give up a year of free agency. He'd still be 29 when he hits the market. and he could still get a 10-year deal at that point for $800 million or whatever it would be at that point with the
I would try to sign him somehow if you could. I don't know if that's even possible.
Should kick into some of that salary.
But what is
Rich,
possible now? We got to take a break. Back in a couple minutes. All right, welcome back to the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Rich Walsh. We were talking a little bit about Paul Skeens. I want to continue this real quick. Will, you said he loves Pittsburgh, but did he love getting pulled as he was pitching a no-hitter?
I mean, nobody loves getting pulled during a no-hitter. I think there were a lot of factors in there. Kerry Wood, I think, had a really interesting piece that he resurfaced this week. He wrote a few years ago about how he went for it at a young age and blew his arm out, right? So if the game was 10-0, I would feel a little bit differently. But where they're at in this, if they were 10 games over 500, I would feel a little bit differently. But you're trying to win the game in front of you. Mm-hmm. And this is the second time in 11 starts he's taken a no-hitter, at least 6, right? So I stand to the reason he's probably going to get his chance.
I had no problem with it. In fact, I thought it was the right call. If it's a perfect game, maybe I feel a little bit differently. But he had 2 more innings to finish. It's not talking about having him come out in the 9th. And it is early in the year. You're already talking about trying to cheat innings and figure out how you're going to skip starts maybe or however you're going to do it. So he would be available if they're in it at the end of September. You don't want to risk. I don't want to live in my fears, but I don't want to risk anything in a game that's – I'm not going to say a no-hitter is meaningless, but in that situation –
But he probably will get one.
I just think it's important to say that, some people are mad at Derek Shelton or mad at the Pirates or whatever. This would be 30 teams in baseball. We could argue and say whatever, and all of us are old. The 3 of us are old enough to remember whenever there wasn't no pitch counts like this, and he would have done it no matter what. And that's fine, and that could be a totally separate discussion. But the Pirates didn't do anything, and any other team wouldn't have done. Derek Shelton didn't do anything. Derek Shelton was probably told by his bosses to do what he did. On top of that, so what's up with this? Like Derek Shelton ruined it or whatever. Some people say that.
And Buzz, I thought his answer, Skeens' answer was. I don't know. I assume he believes it, but he said, listen, if I would have been more efficient in the first couple of innings, I would have had a chance.
What about Livy Dunn's answer about it? She had the best answer of all. She was polished. You can tell she's on Instagram. She knows how to, her presence. You see her answer to that?
No, my wife doesn't let me look at that stuff, Buzz. I don't know what you're looking at on Instagram. But
all right, well, last year, Paul Skeens was drafted 1-1, obviously. This year, they drafted a kid, a high school shortstop, Connor Griffin. Will, don't know much about him, but he's a pretty good hitter. We probably won't see him for 4 years?
Right. I mean, that's the thing. We're talking about this window, right? And this kid. Look, my son's going to be a sophomore in high school, so like me projecting somewhat around my kid's age being a major leaguer in the short term is tough. It's interesting they didn't take somebody that is a little more plug and play, or at least has a shorter runway to get to the majors. But like a 6'4" shortstop, I mean, they already have a 6'7" shortstop, so this would be like the shorter one, I guess, right? But he also could, who knows, maybe they could
Cruz won't be here by the time he comes up.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they're allowed to develop first baseman in the Pirates, but maybe he'll be a first baseman by the time he gets
We just
there.
talked about it. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
How stacked their system is with arms and all. So this is, I mean, Tamar Johnson is their best prospect. He was a high school shortstop taken 3 years ago now in the first round. So they have to at some point. I think they tend to, Ben Cherington and the organization tends to go arms for better or worse. And you got to at some point get some high-end hitter talent too.
You know what they did? They didn't lie. They took the best player available.
By whose account, though? Was he the best player
He was
available?
the best high school player available.
All right. We got to take a break. Coming back next. Stay right there. All right, welcome back to the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Rich Walsh. We're going to continue with the Buccos. It's All-Star Week. For me, the All-Star game isn't what it used to be when I was a kid. Jeff, I don't know what it's like for you, but I mean, if I didn't have this job, I don't know how much I would pay attention.
Well, I mean, back in the day, there wasn't interleague play. There weren't as many games on TV, so a lot of those guys, you didn't see these American League guys, and it was kind of cool to see these new players. Plus, I think they cared a little bit more. They didn't make as much money back then. Now it's kind of like, all right, I just don't want to get hurt. And I think fans kind of read into that, more so in other sports probably than baseball. I think baseball is a little better than most of the other sports, but it's still, I mean, it's an exhibition.
Right. I mean, to Jeff's point, one of the things, and I turned 50 in like a few weeks, right? So in my Facebook page, what'll come up is a lot of here's the 1979 All-Star Game lineup, or here's the 1987, and I'll play a game with myself where I'll try to recognize the player before they flash his name. Oh, there's Rod Carew. Oh, there's Reggie Jackson. Oh, there's Cal Ripken Jr. There's 32, 33 first-time All-Stars. I cover baseball for a living, and I could not pick 15 of those guys out of a lineup. My 15-year-old could, which is probably good for the future of the game. But I think that's part of the problem. It's just not like Chris Sale opted out of the All-Star game. He opted out of pitching so he could pitch today, which is like unheard of. That's just something that wouldn't have happened 30 years ago.
I think baseball always has lent itself to the best All-Star game because, and not to say you can obviously get hurt, right? But it's not a football game. It's not like a football game or even a basketball game where the effort, you're going to go after every ball defensively. The pitchers, I assume, for one inning are going to max out their velocity and throw their best pitches, and the hitters are going to try to hit. It's not a game that lends itself to.
You could show off where it's not at half speed, like in
exactly.
these other sports.
Yeah, in hockey and basketball, it's a joke trying to watch those All-Star games because people are going half speed, and you don't really go half speed in baseball. So I really think, hey, maybe it's a little provincial and it's just me being here, but Skeens against an Aaron Judge is something that will be fun to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. I do like the home run derby, though. And speaking of All-Stars, the #1 Cochran's Red, White, New celebration has been such a big hit, they've extended it through July 31st. Visit any #1 Cochran location, look for special tags marking select new vehicles. Each tag indicates extra savings of up to $1,000 off the already reduced prices. These offers are only available in store, so hurry in now for the Red, White, and New celebration, or check out their inventory at Cochran.com. Well, that's it for our All-Star Pirates celebration show. Tune in next week. We'll be talking about the Steelers. For Will, Jeff, and Chris, I'm Rich Walsh. Have a great night, and we'll see you later.
Merci for the Twizzlers.